So if you clicked on this, you've identified yourself as somebody that cares about Ukraine, and I want to thank you for being here because I know that you could be doing other things. My name is Darren Gertis. I'm a professor, and I've been tracking what's been going on in Ukraine since day 85, and it is now day 278. Now, there's a lot going on in Ukraine, and there's a hot war, there's a propaganda war, there's an economic war, there's a political war. Today we're going to be talking about what's happening militarily. I've talked about propaganda or economics or political stuff in other videos, but today that seems to be the overwhelming issue. So I want to start here. This is the Independent in the UK. The city of Kherson continues to be battered by Russian shelling on a daily basis. And like you have to understand, like the Russians have pulled out of Kherson, but they're now, dropping a barrage regularly on the city. The city is vulnerable because it remains within the range of most of Russia's artillery systems. Volodymyr Zelensky has asked Ukraine to brace for more Russian missile strikes, which could further affect the power grid amid freezing temperatures. And we understand that the terrorists are planning new strikes, he said. And as long as they have missiles, unfortunately, this will not calm down. So the UK Ministry of Defense also talked about this. Despite its liberation by Ukrainian forces on 11 November 2022, Kherson City in southern Ukraine continues to suffer daily bombardment of Russian artillery. On 27 November 2022, a recent high of 50 shelling incidents were reported in the area. Now, so this keeps going on, and you have even more to that. Zelensky talking about, we understand that the terrorists are preparing new strikes. We know this for sure. We just read that. Going on a little bit further, the situation is being controlled by the power engineers trying to, when they hit the energy or the utilities, they have to rebuild it as quickly as possible to get it turned back on. The situation is being controlled by power engineers, and I think that thousands of people who worked around the clock in our country return light, return water, and communications, Zelensky said. Okay, so what's actually going on the ground? There have been, during the last 9 months of full-scale war, 16,000 missile attacks on Ukraine. Okay, so now try to get that into your head. 16,000 missile attacks. That's not talking about other things as well. That's not talking about mortars or drones or artillery or whatever. Over the past 9 months, 16,000. What does that mean? That means an average of 57 missiles dropping on your country every day. And he noted this, 97% of Russian targets were civilian. Okay, that means 97% of your targets are hitting hospitals, schools, churches, all these kinds of civilian targets, energy infrastructure. In fact, they articulate here below, we're fighting a terrorist state, and then said 12,300 were on suburban zones. That's not shooting your missiles at the enemy soldiers. That's shooting your missiles at civilians, which is a war crime. Okay, 12,300 were on suburban zones and villages, 1,900 on houses, more than 500 on military facilities. Finally, you're getting something, 500 on military civilians. That's fine. That's within the rules of war, right? More than 250 on transport infrastructure, about 220 on energy infrastructure, more than 800 on other facilities. So it's really barbaric what's going on there. The ISW adds a little clarity to what's been going on in Russia. So we're talking about Kherson, and they're firing on Kherson City. The Russian military clearly assesses that Ukrainian forces could cross the Dnipro River and conduct counter-offensive operations in eastern Kherson Oblast. So I showed this to you about a week ago, where there was multiple lines, defensive lines, just across the river. You could pick it up by satellite that they were digging and entrenching. Now, the good news to that is that they're taking this seriously, and that's pinning down a number of Russian soldiers there that could otherwise be sent over to the east. And we'll talk about what's going on in the east in just a little bit. So the Russian military is setting conditions for protracted defense in eastern Kherson on the eastern bank of the Dnipro River. And then the Russian defensive position suggests that the Russian military views that threat seriously. Okay, so that's what's going on in Kherson. We'll also look at some other things in the east, but first, despite Russia admitting to terrorism against Ukraine, the OSCE will not expel it. So there are two paragraphs here that I want to point out. The top Kremlin official has effectively stated that Russia will continue bombing Ukraine's critical infrastructure and killing civilians until Kyiv agrees to its demands. How is this different from terrorists who seize planes or buildings and threaten to kill civilians if their demands are not met? It's not very different at all. I mean, it's pretty much the same stuff. Here's the other part of this. On 17 November, Dmitry Peskov was still a little circumspect with his language. He did not deny that Russia was targeting Ukraine's infrastructure, but claimed that their targets are either directly or indirectly related to military potential of Ukraine. Okay, and that's staying within the rules if you're actually doing that. He wasn't, but that's what he was trying to allude to. Peskov was more openly terrorist in his words on 24 November. He asserted then that Ukraine's leaders can, quote, regulate the situation with strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure and stop the suffering of the people by acceding to Moscow's demands. So he's admitting that their strikes are making the people, the civilian population, suffer. Russia is a terrorist state. Just say it with me. Russia is a terrorist state. That's what's going on. Okay. A little bit more, let's turn our attention to Bakhmut. Fighting in the east descends into trench warfare as Russia seeks a breakthrough. So this actually was happening yesterday and today. Fighting around the eastern city of Ukraine, the town of Bakhmut has descended into a bloody morass with hundreds of dead and injured reported daily. Neither Russian nor Ukrainian forces were able to make significant breakthrough after months of fighting. And that's actually correct. So Bakhmut's up here in the red. And I'll show you on this map. So here's where we are on Bakhmut. Now this is 1 month ago today, and then this is the new map. So let's go and compare notes again. Now look at this slightly shaded color here. By the way, Steve Osborne corrected me, and I want to say thank you, Steve, because I talked about the map the other day. And where is he? Steve Osborne. I got a lot of comments here over the last couple of days. Okay, Gertis. No blue is the color to show that it's been recently taken. Ground is colored beige. And he said a little bit before that, I have to correct you because I was talking about look at the blue, look at the green. Green, it's solidified. Blue, they've taken it. But there's a delay of a couple of weeks. That shows like blue shows that it was 2 weeks. It's been taken for 2 weeks and then it becomes green. Okay, the beige here is what you need to look out for. And so thank you. I appreciate that very much. But look at the difference in beige. This is like where the hard fighting is in this color. This is 1 month ago, and this is almost the same thing about where we are now. Denis Davdov does a really good job, and I'm going to let him play for just a little bit so that you can hear what he has to say. I'm going to show you 1 minute of his video yesterday.
Russians tried to reach that city with a straightforward attack. They had lots of the losses, but finally were able to break from the south. And just want to show you what was 2 days ago. And today they took this village. The village name is Ozeranivka, and here we have some of the roads that are leading to the city of Bakhmut, and they tried to reach this part before they took those fields under their control, but due to the natural obstacle, the river and the lakes, they were unable to go forward on this direction. That's why they moved their forces to the south, and here they got some of the success. However, they took just one village, and for now, it's early to say whether they will have the major advancement in this area. However, this road over here was the first defense line of Ukrainian forces, and now it's the very muddy stuff. The soil is very soft. We have rains and sometimes snow, so Russia may use those secondary roads to move their forces to the north here and to the Bakhmut city.
Now that's assuming that the secondary defensive lines won't hold. So that's what, but that gives you a perspective of what's actually happened on the ground. And I think Denis's perspective, if you ever get a chance to look up Denis Davdov and you want to know what's going on the ground, this guy is just, he's awesome. I cannot say enough good things about him. Okay, a couple last articles and then we'll be done. So Democratic and Republican senators demand transfer of Gray Eagle drone to Ukraine. We talked about drones yesterday and many other days before this. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators has intensified pressure on the Biden administration to give top-tier U.S. drone capability, which will fire Hellfire missiles or 8 Stinger munitions. Now, if they can see, that's one thing, but if they can see and actually attack, now you have all kinds of Russian issues or Russian posts and military depots and ships and everything is kind of has to play much more defensively. Most importantly, armed drones could find and attack Russian warships in the Black Sea, breaking its coercive blockade and alleviate dual pressure on the Ukrainian economy and global food prices. If they get these drones, it becomes a game changer. Okay, 2 more articles and we'll be done. One is just, how gruesome must this be? They're collecting human remains of Russian troops in order to be able to, and it doesn't show anything graphically, it blocks it out, but in order to be able to trade back bodies. But this is the reality on the ground, and you need to understand it. The war is ugly. And to the degree that we understand it's ugly, we're better off because we're understanding the reality of the situation. Final article I'm going to show you is about India. This is more political than military by a long shot. Everything else was military. But India has been taking a stance of, they haven't been willing to say much against Russia. India has abstained from condemning Moscow's actions in the United Nations. And they kind of have this, like, let me poke you in the eye, West, kind of attitude. Sometimes I have lived with things that you, the West, has did. Now live with it, India's foreign policy. So, okay, that's fine. You can have that position. You're a sovereign country. I get it. But as the war intensifies, global energy and food shortages are prompting India to reevaluate restrictive stance toward Russia because they're actually being affected. But I think India is going to play an interesting role. Kind of like China, they're not going to be committed. They're going to kind of become a third power. They're not even going to be on this side or that side. They're going to kind of be like non-aligned. And they even say so much here. New Delhi is set to take on the G20 presidency from Indonesia in December 1st, which will host the next G20 meeting in 2023. India has always had a tradition of balancing world powers, but this year we've seen the country's foreign policy establishment possibly embrace an upgraded form of non-alignment. This has the potential to increase New Delhi's global influence going forward. About a month ago, I did an episode on follow the interests. If you understand that, then you'll understand why do world actors operate in particular ways. And that's the video I'm going to tell you to watch next if you haven't seen it before. Follow the interest and you'll understand, why is Turkey acting this way? Why is India acting that way? Why is China acting this way? It'll all just start to make more sense. Hey, thank you for your time. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about what's going on in Ukraine. And I really, really appreciate if you would give me a like so that the YouTube algorithm can further this so more people can hear it.